1963 and October 1965 in and around Manchester, England. Ian Brady was born in Glasgow, Scotland as Ian Duncan Stewart on the 2nd of January 1938 to Margaret Peggy Stewart, an unmarried tea room waitress. The identity of Brady's father has never been reliably ascertained, although his mother said he was a reporter working for a Glasgow newspaper who died 3 months before Brady was born. Stewart had little support, and after a few months was forced to give her son into the care of Mary and John Sloan, a local couple with 4 children of their own. Brady took their family name and became named as Ian Sloan. His mother continued to visit him throughout his childhood. Many writers have suggested that Brady tortured animals, but he always maintained that it's not true. He loved animals. Aged 9, he visited Loch Lomond with his family, where he reportedly discovered an affinity for the outdoors, and a few months later, the family moved to a new council house on an overspilt estate in Pollock. Brady was accepted for Shawlands Academy, a school for above-average pupils. Brady's behaviour worsened at Shawlands. As a teenager, he twice appeared before a juvenile court for housebreaking. He left the academy aged 15 and took a job as a tea boy at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Govan. 9 months later, he began working as a butcher's messenger boy. Brady had a girlfriend, Evelyn Grant, but their relationship ended when he threatened her with a flint knife after she visited a dance with another boy. He again appeared before the court, this time with 9 charges against him, and shortly before his 17th birthday, he was placed on probation on condition that he lived with his mother. By then, Brady's mother had moved to Manchester and married an Irish fruit merchant named Patrick Brady. Patrick got Ian a job as a fruit porter at Smithfield Market, and Ian took Patrick's surname. Within a year of moving to Manchester, Brady was caught with a sack full of lead seals he had stolen, was trying to smuggle out of the market. He was sent to Strangeways for 3 months. As he was still under 18, Brady was sentenced to 2 years in a borstal for training. He was sent to Latchmere House in London and then Hatfield Borstal in the West Riding of Yorkshire. After being discovered drunk on alcohol he had brewed, he was moved to the much tougher unit in Hull. In order to straighten him out, he was shown the gallows that was still in operation at the time. It had the complete opposite effect, and Brady decided from then on everyone was going to pay in the worst way for ever troubling him. Released on the 14th of November 1957, Brady returned to Manchester, where he took a labouring job which he halted and was dismissed from another job in a brewery. Deciding to better himself, he obtained a set of instruction manuals on bookkeeping from a local public library, with which he astonished his parents by studying alone in his room for hours. In January 1959, Brady applied for and was offered a clerical job at Millwards, a wholesale chemical distribution company based in Gorton. He was regarded by his colleagues as a quiet, punctual, but short-tempered young man. Brady read books including Teachers of German, Desart and Mein Kampf, as well as works on Nazi atrocities. He rode a Tiger Club Brady was apparently impressed by Smith's demeanour. The two talked about society, the distribution of wealth, and the possibility of robbing a bank. The young Smith was similarly impressed by Brady, who throughout the day had paid for his food and wine. The trip to the Lake District was the first of many outings. Hindley was apparently jealous of their friendship, but became closer to her sister. In 1964, Hindley, her grandmother, and Brady were rehoused as part of the post the evening of 16th of June 1964, Hindley asked 12-year-old Keith Bennett, who was on his way to his grandmother's house in Longside, for help in loading some boxes into a mini pickup, after which she said she would drive him home. Brady was in the back of the van. Hindley drove to a lay-by on Saddleworth Moor and Brady went off with Bennett, supposedly looking for a lost glove. After about 30 minutes, Brady returned alone, carrying a spade that he had hidden there earlier. In response to Hindley's question, said they had sexually assaulted Bennett and strangled him with a piece of string. Leslie Ann Downey. Brady and Hindley visited a funfair in Ancoats on the 26th of December 1964 and noticed that 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey was apparently alone. They approached her and deliberately dropped some shopping they were carrying, then asked for some help in taking the packages to their car, and then to Wardlebrook Avenue. At the house, Downey was undressed, gagged, and forcibly posed for photographs before being hard and killed, perhaps strangled with a piece of string. Hindley later maintained that she went to Villa Park for Downey and found her dead when she returned. Brady claimed that Hindley killed Downey. The following morning, Brady and Hindley drove Downey's body to Saddleworth Moor and buried her naked with her clothes at her feet in a shallow grave. Edward Evans. On the evening of 6th of October 1965, Hindley drove Brady to Manchester Central Railway Station, where she waited outside in the car whilst he selected a victim. After a few minutes, Brady reappeared in the company of a 17-year-old Edward Evans, an apprentice engineer who lived in Ardwick, to whom he introduced Hindley as his sister. Brady later claimed that he had picked up Evans for a sexual encounter. They drove to Brady and Hindley's house on Wardlebrook Avenue, where they relaxed over a bottle of wine. At some point, Brady sent Hindley to fetch Smith, her brother-in-law. Hindley's family had not approved of Maureen's marriage to Smith. Throughout the previous year, Brady had been cultivating a friendship with Smith, who had become in awe of Brady, something that increasingly worried Hindley as she felt it compromised their safety. Hindley returned with Smith and told him to wait outside for her signal, a flashlight. When the signal came, Smith knocked on the door and was met by Brady, whilst he had come for the miniature wine bottles, and left him in the kitchen saying he was going to collect the wine. Smith later told the police over 17 hours long. Toppin described it as a very well worked out performance in which I believe she told her just as much as she wanted me to know and no more. He added that he was struck by the fact that, in Hindley's telling, she was never there when the killings took place. She was in the car over the brow of a hill, in the bathroom, and even in the case of Evans' murder, in the kitchen. He felt he had witnessed a great performance rather than a genuine confession. Police visited Brady in prison again and told him of Hindley's confession, which at first he refused to believe. Once presented with some of the details that Hindley had provided of Reed's abduction, Brady decided that he too was prepared to confess, but on one condition, that immediately afterwards he'd be given the means to commit suicide, a request for which it was impossible for the authorities to comply with. On the 1st of July, after more than 100 days of searching the moors, they found Reed's body 3 feet under the surface, 100 yards from where Downey's had been found. Brady had been cooperating with the police for some time, and when this news reached him, he made a formal confession to DCS Topping, and in a statement to the press said he too would help the police in their search. He was taken on the moor on the 3rd of July, but seemed to lose his bearings, blaming changes in the intervening years. The search was called off at 3 p.m, by which time a large crowd of press and television reporters had gathered on the moor. DC Topham refused to allow Brady a second visit to the moor before police calling off their search on the 24th of August. Brady was taken to the moor a second time on the 6th of December and claimed to have located Bennett's burial site, but the body was never found. Soon after his first visit to the moor, Brady wrote a letter to a BBC reporter, giving some sketchy details of 5 additional deaths that he claimed to have been involved in. A man in the Piccadilly area of Manchester, another victim on Saddleworth Moor, 2 more in Scotland, and a woman whose body was allegedly dumped in a canal. Police failed to discover any unsolved crime matching the details that he supplied, deciding that this was insufficient evidence to launch an official investigation. Following his conviction, Brady was moved to HM Prison Durham, where he was asked to live in solitary confinement. He spent 19 years in mainstream prisons before being diagnosed as a psychopath in November 1985, sent to the high-security Park Lane Hospital, now Ashworth Hospital, in Maghall, Merseyside. He made it clear that he never wanted to be released. The trial judge recommended that Brady's life sentence should mean life, and successive Home Secretaries agreed with that decision. In 1982, the Lord Chief Justice Lord Lane said of Brady, "This is the case, if ever there is to be one, when a man should stay in prison till he dies." The November 2007 death of John Straven, who had spent 55 years in prison for murdering 3 children, meant that Brady became the longest-serving prisoner in England and Wales. Although Brady refused to work with Ashworth psychiatrists, he occasionally corresponded with people outside the hospital. Subject to prison authority censorship, including Lord Longford, writer Colin Wilson, and various journalists. In one letter written in 2005, Brady claimed that the murders were a million existential exercise of just over a year, which was concluded in December 1964. By then, he claimed he and Hindley had turned their attention to armed robbery, which they had begun to prepare by acquiring guns and vehicles. During several years of interactions with forensic psychologist Chris Cowley, including face-to-face meetings, Brady told him of an aesthetic fascination he had with guns, despite his never having used one to kill. He complained bitterly about conditions at Ashworth, which he hated. In 1999, his right wrist was broken in what he claimed was an hour-long unprovoked attack by staff. Brady subsequently went on a hunger strike, but while English